Thank you so much, Maggie. Hello, everybody. I'm seeing people are slowly popping in, and I just want to say hi. I see some familiar names, so welcome. Um, so I just want to start off today a little bit with a story. For those of you who don't know me, I'm in my 40s. I'm happily married to my soulmate, and I'm a fur baby mummy. And my fur baby's name is DJ, and he's 2 years old. My work, and Maggie did an amazing job describing what I do, it brings me great joy. In this particular moment in my life, as Maggie mentioned, I happen to be back in school, and I feel really grateful for that. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, which is studying mindfulness and mindful self-compassion. I find myself working mostly from home, and maybe some of you can resonate with that experience. I'm actually partnered up in my business with my husband, and we love working together, although at times it can be challenging. Life hasn't always been this way for me. I grew up here in Toronto, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm from Toronto, Canada. In fact, I live not very far from my family home. But one thing that I can tell you about my life is that something has been very consistent and constant, and that's change. I guess that's how I came to do what I do, which is coaching and helping other people create purpose and manage through the change in their life. When I was younger, I actually didn't even understand what change was. I didn't realize that change was actually a thing. And it's likely because it was so prevalent in my life, it just happened all the time. I grew up in a family where we were taught to be adaptive and flexible and understanding and compassionate. And why? Why was it that way? Well, it was really because of my mom. And my mom was a warrior. She was my brave guide, but she was also chronically ill. And I guess that should have made life complicated for us. And so I'm going to show you this picture because this kind of depicts what I think of her. At times, it certainly did make it complicated, but I never saw that in my mom. I never saw her as sick, frail, or unable. I saw her as fierce, like this image. I saw her as persistent, strong, determined, and she was mostly my warrior. And it's because she showed up. It's because she was always present. She came to the PTA meetings. She showed up at all the track meets. She put together all the birthday parties. And that meant sometimes that she was doing it from her bed. But she was showing up and she was pulling it off. And I knew that over the years, and in fact, there were many years where she was suffering greatly. In fact, sometimes, I remember this specifically, she would just leave events. She would just kind of vanish. And it was because she was in so much pain. And I remember like being in the car, we'd be going to like as a family to like baseball games, and we'd just be suddenly like turn around and we'd have to go home. But she did it with courage and strength. And I never suffered from what we call today FOMO, fear of missing out. It was just part of our normal. She made it seem like it was okay. And sometimes now I think back and I wonder, how the heck did she do it? How did she make so much challenge and change and difficulty seem manageable? And how did she always manage to get all of us through it? Well, she was always being a mother first. And she was always showing up and being present. She was always being fierce, persistent, determined, and she was always being our warrior. And one thing that she always did for us was she would always tell us stories. And that's something that I remember about her. When life seemed to be insurmountable, my mom would share stories. And she would use stories to break the ice, to kind of melt the tension, to keep us together, to share a message, and always to guilt trip us. She was really good at that. Perhaps some of you can relate to that. And to share legacy. And that's, when I think back on it, that's really where I learned storytelling. I'm older now, and my mom passed away just a year ago. But I learned so much from her. And now I get to share that with the world. And the big thing that I took away from her was the power of mindful storytelling. And so I'll just ask, and I know we can see a little bit in the chat box, but many people would know today, what is mindfulness? I'm sure people have heard that, but I just wanted to share quickly, in case some people weren't familiar, that mindfulness is really about being aware of those moment-to-moment experiences, being open to the present moment. And so what does that mean for storytelling? So it really means, when you think about being aware of your moment-to-moment experiences, it's being present throughout your creative process every single day by becoming consciously aware and paying attention to how you feel, what you're thinking, and the impact of what you are creating and sharing in the world through your storytelling journey. And so people ask me, well, why mindful storytelling? So I'm going to share with you some of the reasons why. It's proven to reduce stress and anxiety. And so you might think, well, how? How does that apply to me every single day? Well, let's think about it. So people are using, and you yourselves will be using, content creation every day, coming up with stories, whether it's in the social media posts that you might be creating for those of you who do, or perhaps if you're working in a work environment, you may be preparing a story that you want to share with your boss if you're trying to pitch something. But if you have a process in place to help you create stories, it reduces the stress and the anxiety around the process. It reduces our sense of fear and overwhelm. So having a simple and easy process to follow to help us write stories, craft content that's meaningful, builds confidence, reduces that fear. So it builds patience. Storytelling can be fun when we embody patience and we start to understand. It improves our decision-making and non-judgmental thinking. Try to say that one 3 times fast. It also helps with creative flow. So positive energy, being creative in the moment. Sometimes that's an area where we struggle. And it improves focus on the present moment. So why would we want to do that? It means that we're showing up in the moment and that we care. And so I want to stop for just a minute and do an activity with all of you. So I'm going to ask you to just stop and pause wherever you are, no matter what you're doing, and just put everything that you have in your hands down for just a minute. And I'm going to ask you if you can just close your eyes. And no matter what you're doing, just take a moment right here, right now, and pay attention. Notice what you hear. No matter what the sounds are around you, notice how you feel. Allowing yourself to just settle in. And notice your breath for just a moment. Are you feeling energized? Or maybe tired from lunch? Letting your breath just be. And keeping your eyes closed. I'm just going to talk a bit about stories. Stories start with ideas, messages, purpose. But where do the ideas come from? Taking a moment now. Where do ideas come from? Content creation, brainstorming, ideating. They can be so challenging for some people. Perhaps when I say that, negative emotions are stirred. Recognize that and allow it to be. Or perhaps you feel energized, excited, compelled. Sometimes there is a story within us, just ready to come out. No matter where we are today, allow ourselves to be. And coming back, noticing our breath and opening our eyes. Okay. So sometimes just taking a moment to center ourselves before we do an exercise. Now we're going to have a little fun. I want you to just take a second right here and write down 3 feelings that come to mind. Just the first 3 feelings that pop into your mind. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to jot it down. Does everybody have 3 feelings written down? Are we okay with that? Enough time? Okay, I can't see people's faces, so I'm gonna go ahead. Now, I want you to look at those 3 feelings, and I want you to think back to a time in your life when you felt those 3 feelings before. Take a moment, and I want you to spend the next minute or two and write a sentence or two about that moment. You're writing a little bit about that moment, a defining moment. Just writing 1 or 2 sentences that talk about that moment in time. If you have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or just take a few moments. This is the starting of what we call a purpose statement. Creating and coming up with defining moments in your life to start writing a story. So I'm hoping I've given you guys about just over a minute and a half. Is there anyone that has any question, or I'm going to continue moving forward? We're just going to leave the activity for a moment and we're going to come back to it. So I just want to talk a little bit about a few things that we know for sure. So one thing is for sure that stories are everywhere. It's a topic, but stories have been around since the dawn of time. So since cavemen, since the Egyptians. But what's changing about stories is the how, the who, the where, the what. You know, for those of you who are here that are the Canadians in the room, I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago, but Trudeau even posted a job offer in the paper for a storyteller. And so the conversation around storytelling is reaching new heights. And people are communicating differently. Marketing is no longer considered your key differentiator, but stories can be. And it's you that is sort of the key unique differentiator. It's your story. It's your identity. And so I wanted to share a few things that might startle you. And I'll explain to you why they're so important as it relates to storytelling. So the first is that regardless of whether it's the US or Canada and several other countries around the world, recently our Global Trust Indicator Index report came back. And guess what? Our trust index is falling. Both Canada and the US, year over year, trust has fallen. And guess what, Canada? We're lower than the US. So what drives that? Really, the predominant concerns lie in the pace of technology, also our belief in our societal leaders' willingness to change, and the pace and the trust level in our news media. And that doesn't matter whether it's traditional or digital. Here's another fact I want to share with you. A number, 75%. So what does that mean? It means 75% of people in a recent study were polled, and they communicated clearly that effective communication is an important leadership attribute. Okay, but only a third believe that leaders are actually strong communicators. Here's another fact. 72% and 41%. Okay, 72% of people in organizations don't actually feel confident in their company strategy and don't feel that it's clear. 41% of entrepreneurs and small business owners actually have strategies. So what does that mean? Opportunity. Opportunity for what? Storytelling. Why? So here's the thing. This is the most important part. Stories build trust really quickly. It can help bind you through trust. And so what I like to say, and I kind of stole this from Stephen Covey, is that it's like building deposits into a trust bank account really quickly. And also, stories create clarity. In a world of cluttered communication and misinterpretation, you can use stories to be your asset for clearing things up. Think about how many times you get a text message or an email and you start to make assumptions on what someone's saying and how they feel. I'm sure people can relate to that. I know I can. I do it with my husband all the time. Authenticity, buzzword, but it's a buzzword for a reason. It's because we really want to feel that genuine connection. It's important to us. And the story, as I talked about earlier, is ours. It's an easy way to share transparency and honesty with others. Empathy, our ability to sense other people's emotions, imagining what people are feeling, connecting through emotion. If we connect through someone with their story, we create a decision tree immediately, whether or not we want to strengthen that bond and move forward to create a stronger bond. Which relates to the basic human need, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, connection. And connection moves us. Creating memorable moments. In a world where there's so much going on, to be memorable through a story creates the impact. And so I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to share one more story with you. And I'm going to ask you a question. Who here is familiar with imposter syndrome? And I can't see hands, but I'm going to just go over what it is in case there are people here that are not familiar with it. It's basically a collection of feelings that we have that are related to inadequacy and doubt about ourselves. And that will persist regardless of whether we have proof that we are actually relevant and successful. And I'm going to read you a quote because I found this and I feel like it's so powerful from Harvard Business Review. Imposters suffer from chronic self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence that override any feelings of success or external proof of their competence. My story starts here. And perhaps some of you are nodding your heads because you can relate to this. I've suffered from imposter syndrome in my life. In fact, at multiple intervals. In the corporate world, I liken it to wearing a mask. One time I was hired into a senior position, very large organization, and I was hired for my experience and expertise, leading teams, building teams, and then really presenting and creating to executive leadership and getting buy-in to change mindset. So pretty big role. And then I got into the job, and the job on the paper and in the interviews wasn't what I signed up for. I'm sure that's happened to many of you before too. So things were different. And I had a team of direct reports reporting into me. And I remember the first 6 months, I would go into my job and then I would go home and I'd get in my car and I would be driving home and I would be crying. And I would be thinking to myself, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can make this last. I'm getting chills actually even thinking about this because it was really scary. Well, hello, imposter syndrome. I thought, when are people going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing? And at the time, I had no idea what imposter syndrome was. It was just happening to me. But here's the thing, I really like the people and I like the culture and I like challenge. And I had learned from the best, my mom, that if you embody the right mindset and you're patient and you're curious and you trust, then you're going to find a way. And I had to stop myself and sit back and think for a moment. And I had to it was one of those crossroads, those moments in life where you have to make a decision, right? Was I going to lean in or opt out? And I realized that there was no way that I could do it alone. And I wanted to lean in. And so I took a leap of faith and I went into my boss's office and I asked him for help, right? Now you have to realize that my boss at the time was like a giant to me. He had been with the company for 20 years and he was the go-to guy. He was what we like to call in the corporate world a SME, a subject matter expert. And everybody came to him with all their questions, constantly knocking on his door. He was the guy. And I had also watched him. I had paid attention. And I had noticed, and I would watch what he was doing, and I learned two things. He came in super early in the morning, and he loved to tell stories. And so I changed what I did. I started to mimic him. I would come in super early in the morning, and then I would go in, I would sit with him, and I would listen to his stories. And over the next 6 months, I learned. And I learned from him. And carefully and slowly, my confidence built. And soon, I started to become the SME. And ultimately, I overcame my imposter syndrome. And so that and the perception changed, not only within me, but within the company. It was one of the best experiences of my life. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you about next, which is really just perception. And perception matters. And it's the second key to storytelling. Because you have the ability to think about and understand the perception you want to create. And it's important to be able to do that. Because sometimes the way it is on the outside isn't what happens when you put it out into the world. And so I just want to take a moment, and we're going to do one more activity together that's really focused on perception. And I'm going to ask you to just take a moment right here, right now, and I'm going to ask you to revisit that purpose statement that you wrote. I'm just going to give you a second, just reread that statement you wrote at the beginning in the first activity. And I want you to just think for a moment, are you clear on how you want your audience, your readers, to understand how you want them to interpret that defining moment, that purpose statement? So for example, in the story that I shared with you up front, like the first story I shared with you, my purpose was really to educate you in a meaningful way how mindful storytelling came into my life and became important to me. The perception I was trying to convey was respect, insight, and connection. So now it's your turn. I'd love you to write down just three words. What is the perception that you're trying to create with the story you're going to write? And use that purpose you wrote to guide you.
Jen, I'm just going to jump in here.
Yeah, I recognize that we're out of time.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just wanted to say that some of the chat, I'm not sure if you're seeing it.
Oh, no.
I'm seeing some messages here trying to convey trust. Another one here says looking for compassion.
Oh, I love that. That sounds amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing in the chat. If anyone else wants to share, please go ahead. I'm going to, because I know we're close to time, I just wanted to, did anyone else have anything else they want to share on the activity around perception? These are really the first two steps in writing your story. There are actually 5 steps in the story writing process. I know we don't get to get into all 5 today. What you can do is I can share with Maggie the 5-step process and how you get there. I wanted to be able to help you kind of lift off into your story writing process in at least half an hour. But I can share the full process roadmap with you and share that through Maggie. But that was sort of the journey I wanted to help take you on today. Whoops, I'm going backwards and not forwards. So for those of you who want to get in touch in the future, please feel free. I would really love to hear from you if you have any feedback you want to share. And if there's any questions, then I think we open the floor to questions.
Okay, thanks, Jen. That was great. We can definitely send out in our follow-up email that information from Jen. And I will let everyone know if you have a question now, you can use the chat box. You can also email info@savvyladies.org. And I'm just going to pull up the first question for you, Jen, is asking about storytelling when it comes to speaking versus writing. Is there a different mindset you should have for those 2 different mediums of communication?
So I would say the mindset and the process that we use is the same. So we definitely believe that the mindset and the process that we use to approach storytelling would be the same regardless of what medium you're using. Yeah.
Okay.
The format is obviously slightly different, like the scripting and the format is different, but mindset is the same.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question for you is asking, do you feel like you've given a piece of yourself away when you tell stories? And if so, how do you feel when it's published or shared?
So I would say that when you want to share a personal side of yourself with your stories, there is a vulnerability component to storytelling and folding in the personal side of you. I don't see of it as giving a piece of me away, but sharing and opening up and connecting. And this is so that you can teach and people can learn from your experiences. It allows people to grow. And I know that some people do struggle with that sort of balance between being too vulnerable, but that is really where the sweet spot is in terms of building those connections. And that's also your comfort level. Like some people are very, very comfortable being extremely raw and very emotional and very personal. And some people are not so much. And it's finding that part of you and what you're willing to open up to.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you is asking, how do you get over that fear of being vulnerable so that you can start sharing?
So that could be like a whole presentation on its own, but I can definitely give you, and I think that depends where the fear is coming from, and where your fear is rooted in. If it's grounded in like a fear of, getting up and sharing your story with other people, or is it, rooted in value perception? So understanding the root of the fear will help to move past the fear.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And so I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out to, I do a lot of work around moving past fear and building confidence. So if you have any specific questions around that, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you says that you talked about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I don't always feel comfortable talking about my successes, so they really haven't been a part of my story. What do you suggest for someone who doesn't want to appear self-centered, but is realizing that I do need to show off some more of my strength?
So and that goes back to the narrative, the storytelling, and how we tell our stories. So, and we go back to the perception piece and learning to create the narrative. So it's not about the me story. It's about the learning and the experience and the lesson learned that comes from the power of success, right? And achievement. And so it's how we tell our stories and the beauty of sharing that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Don't be share like don't be so like I would say to people, your achievements are beautiful and powerful and meaningful, and we have to be proud of ourselves, and that's okay. It's okay to celebrate success. I know we kind of come from a societal background where we've diminished that quite a bit, and that is something we have to get used to. And it takes a little bit of work, like a muscle, like working a muscle. Practice makes permanent. So we have to consistently work that muscle to get familiar and comfortable with using it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, I think this is the last question for you, and it's asking how do you handle storytelling if you have different audiences, when you maybe have some different services or products for different groups. Should you be adapting your storytelling for each one of those?
Yeah, so it's almost like the image I showed you with the cake that has different layers. It's again, you have to know your audience. The more familiar you are with your audience, the more you can actually take your story and customize it. But again, there has to be authenticity to your message. So it's, knowing that there's taking your story and making sure that you're still staying authentic. But again, you also have to know your audience and know what's appropriate for your audience, know what appeals to your audience, what's going to engage your audience. So there's a little bit of both sides when you're storytelling. It's about doing the research, and that's a big part of the next phase of our storytelling roadmap is really about, we call it the pursuit of impact, and that is where you do all of the research. And research is important, and that is really about understanding the people you're presenting to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we did have another question that just came in, and I think it also relates. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the information here on your slide, and the question is asking if you work with individuals and companies or entrepreneurs. Is this relevant to all of those? So Jen, I'll just let you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yes. So I work with entrepreneurs and business leaders. So I work with both. And I do one-on-one coaching, and I do also group coaching. So I do both. I think right now what you're looking at is I'm showing some of the workshops that we have, as well as I've got up here the one-on-one coaching, and then I can just go. Whoops! I keep doing the wrong thing here. We also have a program that we're launching in the new year that's called the Art of Mindful Storytelling, and that's coming in 2021. And it's a 10-week program that's going to be both fusing together group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and online learning. And it's really specific to teaching entrepreneurs and business owners to level up their brand and business by building a mindful mindset and mastering their storytelling. So we have multiple verticals in how we can support entrepreneurs and business leaders.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
We make sure that we send all of this information in the follow-up email. And as Jen mentioned, I believe it was the 5 steps that we can share as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So we will make sure everyone gets that information in the follow-up email. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today and asking questions. And Jen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and helping us with this. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jen. It was excellent.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye, Jen. Bye, everybody.
Bye.